Hi, in this video, I'm going to try to show you how a Tesla coil works and explain why it works. I'm going to focus mainly on this layer excited version of the circuit of a Tesla coil, which is the easiest one there is. That is the easiest way you can build a Tesla coil, that you can replicate that effect of a Tesla coil. Now, for a normal Tesla coil, we do need to know some circuit theory to fully understand that coil. But for this layer excited version, we only need to know very little of circuit theory, and we need to know just a little bit of concepts. That's it. For normal Tesla coil, we need to know a lot. We need to know a lot of concepts. We need to know some circuit theory. But for the layer exciter, we only need to know some concepts. Those concepts are resonance, transformers, and transistors. So we need to know how a transistor works. We need to know what is a transformer, and we need to know what is a transistor, and what will be the role of the transistor in the circuit. So I'm going to go over those concepts first, and then I'm going to explain how this layer exciter circuit works. And I'm also going to show you one that I've built. So let's start with the transistor. Okay, so with the transistor, here we are. This is schematic for an NPN type transistor. So first I'm going to go over what the NPN stands for. So N stands for N-type doping, and P stands for P-type doping. So we have N-type doping on top, P-type doping, and then N-type doping again. Now, the middle part of the transistor, a transistor will have 3 pins, at least the one I'm going to use. It will have 3 pins. The one in the middle will be called the base, B, base. Then the one on top will be the collector, and the one on the bottom will be the emitter. So the current will flow from the collector to the emitter across the base, right? Now, here, I'm going to explain what that doping means. So a transistor is usually made of silicon, which is a semiconductor. Now, if you know a little bit of semiconductors, this might sound familiar to you. So we have N-type doping and P-type doping, right? So N-type doping is basically when we diffuse an element to that silicon or that semiconductor that we have, but that element has extra valence electrons. So we're going to have those blue dots represent extra electrons. So we're going to have a more negative semiconductor. That's why the N-type stands for by that negative N-type. Now for P-type, it's the opposite. So instead of diffusing an element that has extra electrons, we're going to diffuse an element that has fewer valence electrons. So those fewer valence electrons will leave holes, and those holes are represented here by those red dots. Okay, so once we know that, we also need to know there are some gaps in between the N, P, and the again the other N section of the transistor. So those gaps are really important, and I'm going to explain why. So basically, if we pass some current through the base, right, we're going to fill in those holes that are in the P section of that transistor, right? So if we fill in those holes, then those gaps will be closed, and then when those gaps are closed, it will allow the current to flow from top to bottom, from the collector to the emitter. So basically, in this circuit, I'm going to use a transistor as a switch, not as a amplifier. So as a switch, basically, when there's no current on the base, there will be it will be off. There will be no current passing through, right? Now, when there is current in the base, when there's enough current in the base to close those gaps, the switch will be on. So basically, you will have current passing from the collector to the emitter. So you can have a switch on and off, and it all depends on that base. That base, whenever you have current or not. Okay, so that is how a transistor works, and that's all we need to know for transistors. Okay, once we know about transistors, we also need to talk about resonance. So here I'm going to use this example to explain resonance with very, very simple words, with a very simple example. Again, it's more complicated than this, but this is just to explain what is resonance. So here we have a person pushing someone in a swing, right? So let's say you go to the park with your little brother, your little sister. You're pushing them in the swing, but you don't push them like it's shown here in the picture. You don't do this, right? You don't. When they're coming back at you, you just don't push back. You just don't oppose the motion, right? Because you will destroy the motion. You will stop the pendulum swing. You will stop the swing. You don't want to do that, right? So what we usually do is we wait until that swing comes back at us, right, at the highest point, and then we push again. So that will allow for the maximum amplitude of that wave, of that pendulum motion, right? So that is what resonance is. Basically, you're going to have an external force, an external source that will be resonant to your frequency, and that will allow for higher amplitudes, for the maximum amplitude possible, right? So if you wait until the highest point when they come back at you, and you push again every time, that will give you the maximum possible amplitude that you can get, right? If you push at random times, you will not get the maximum amplitude possible. So that is how resonance works. Again, very simple example, but that is basically how resonance works. You need to be resonant with the swing frequency, and that is how it works. So that is all we need to know for this circuit. Okay, and the last concept that we need to know is transformers before we go into the actual Tesla coil. So we also need to know how a transformer works, because the Tesla coil is it's a transformer itself. It's just a different structure, different. It has a different core, and I'm going to explain that in a second. Okay, so a transformer has two coils, the primary and the secondary. I mean, you can have more complicated transformers, but the basic traditional transformer looks like this. So you have your core, which is in this case an iron core. And you have your primary winding and then your secondary winding. Then, again, one thing I should mention is that transformers only work with AC current. The reason for that is because we need to know about Faraday's law and Ampere's law. So Ampere's law says that every time we pass a current through a wire, one magnetic field will be created around it, right? So if you have a wire going in this direction, right, going up, the magnetic field will be going around that wire, right? So it'll be like this. So this is the direction of the current. This is the direction of the magnetic field, right? Okay, so that is Ampere's law. Now we also need to know about Faraday's law, which is the law of induction. So basically that says if you have a change in magnetic flux with time, you're going to induce an EMF. You're going to induce a current in a coil, in a loop. That's basically what it means, with very simple words again. So here, that Ampere's law and Faraday's law is the reason why transformer only works with AC voltage, AC current. Okay, so in the primary winding here, in the primary here, we have the input, right? So this AC source will be pulsating, will be going like this, right? So that will create a magnetic field, but the magnetic field will also be like this because the current is also going like this. So you will create a pulsating magnetic field. So that pulsating magnetic field is changing. It's not a constant magnetic field. So that magnetic field will be transferred along the core, along that iron core, right, to the secondary winding, to the secondary coil, and that pulsating magnetic field will induce a current in the opposite direction, right? So that's why the windings are opposite. That's why one is going counterclockwise, and that is why the other is going in a clockwise fashion. Because Faraday's law, well, Lenz's law actually says the induced EMF will be opposite, right? Will oppose the change. So that is why the windings are in opposite directions. So like this, right? Now the voltage that you're gonna get on the output is proportional to the number of turns that you have in the secondary and the primary. So let's say the voltage on the secondary is proportional to the voltage on the primary and the ratio of the number of turns on the secondary and the primary. So basically, let's say you have 5 turns on the primary, you have 10 turns on the secondary, so twice as many, right? Okay, so let's say we have 10 volts on the input. So we have 10 volts on the input, and the ratio between the secondary and the primary is 2, because you have twice as many turns. The voltage on the output will be twice. So if we had 10 on the primary, we'll have 20 on the output, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so that is basically, with very simple words, how a transformer works. Now, we cannot create energy out of nowhere. So that extra voltage that we get comes at a price. We'll have lower current at the secondary winding. We have a higher voltage. So we need to be careful about that too. But I'm not gonna go into details about that. That is basically how it works. So you can induce a voltage in the secondary winding, and that will be proportional to the ratio of the number of turns. That is all we need to know. Okay, so now we have all the concepts that we need to fully understand how this layer excited version of the Tesla coil works. So let's go into the Tesla coil then. Okay, so here we are finally with this layer exciter Tesla coil. So this is the circuit diagram. Now these values that are shown here are not the exact same values that I used for my circuit. I used a different number of turns in the primary and the secondary, and I did not use an LED. Everything else is pretty much the same. 9-volt battery, 22 kilo ohms resistor, and NPN type transistor 2222A. So that is all the same. Okay, so let's start. First, the switch. Let's pretend it's closed. That switch is just to manually turn on and off the circuit, right? The coil. Okay, so now we have a 9-volt DC battery, right? It's just a battery. So you might be saying, okay, you said transformers only work with AC, but I'm going to explain why we're using DC source in a moment. Okay, so we have a DC source, which is just a battery, 9 volts. Okay, so here the current will start flowing through here. So to the transit, some current will go through here, and then some current will go through here, right? This is just basic circuit theory. So basically, current will be split through here and here, right? Now again, electrons always go to the easiest path, so more current will go here, right, to this primary coil. But this current that's going through the resistor is enough to excite the base. So that base will be activated, as I told you, in the transistor, right? So this switch will be open at this time because that base is excited at this point in time. So this base will be, this switch will be on, this transistor will be on. So basically that will close this loop, right? So basically we'll have this closed loop, right? Okay, so now when we pass the current here through this loop, this primary will have a magnetic field that will be created because of Ampere's law, right? Okay, so we're gonna have a magnetic field that will be created here in this, in this primary coil, and that magnetic field is growing as you pass current through it, right? So that will drive the secondary, right? So that magnetic field is going all the way to the secondary, and that will drive the secondary. And now we're gonna have current flow in this direction, right? Now again, some current will go through here, and then here, this current will oppose that current that was going to the base of the transistor. So what happens here? So that current, that blue current, is driving that base low. So when we have the base low, the base will not be activated at this point. So then the switch will be off. So there will be nothing going through that transistor. So if there's nothing going through that transistor, right, then we're going to have this kind of situation, right? And that transistor will be closed, that switch will be closed, and then there will be nothing going on in the primary, right? So the point that I want to make, that I want to mention is that in the primary, when it's on, it will drive the secondary, right? Now the secondary will turn off the switch, so then the primary will go like this, will go off. There will be nothing going on in the primary, right? Then since there's nothing going on in the primary, that primary was driving the secondary, right? So if the secondary was driven by the primary, now the primary is not doing anything, then that secondary will be like this again, right? But now, since that secondary is like this, right? This is secondary, then that primary, that transistor will be on again because we will not have any blue current opposing that red current to the base of the transistor, right? So now the switch will be open again, and the primary will be working again, and then that will drive the secondary again. So it'll basically be going like this. So that's why we need to know the concept of resonance, because actually these two coils, the primary and the secondary, are resonant to each other. When the primary goes off, the secondary is on, then the secondary goes off, then the primary is on, and then they will be driving each other. So every time, every loop, and again, this happens really fast, so it will be going really, really fast. So it will be going like this. And now, when we have that kind of motion, when we have accelerating electrons, we will have radiation. So that radiation, because of that pulsation that we're going to have, because of that high frequency, that will create the radiation of the energy of wireless electricity, wireless power, and that's why we have that nice effect of a Tesla coil with this very, very simple circuit. So that transistor is really important, because that is what makes the circuit resonant to each other without doing anything, without tuning the frequency. Because normally with a normal Tesla coil, we have to tune in the primary and the secondary, and that sometimes can be really, really hard, because you have the secondary with some turns, some capacitance, right? And then the primary, you also need to change the value of the capacitance, the number of turns, the dimensions of the coil, and you also need to have a good timing. So when the secondary is going off, you need to time the primary to go on, and so on, right? So that is the hard part about a normal Tesla coil. But at the same time, that is what makes this circuit really, really simple, because basically that transistor, that switch, will be going on and off, and that will basically make the current pulsate. So we will actually have a pulsating current, because this is going really fast. So we have pulsating current that will come like as a AC current, right? So that is why the transformer works in this case. Now this transformer is an air core transformer. Air core transformers allow for higher frequencies than iron core transformers. So that is why we do not want to have any cores like iron cores, like in the previous one that I showed. Also, one more thing, this is more technical, but I think I should mention it, is that here, as you can see, this circuit is open in the secondary. So how does it work? We cannot have current flowing through an open circuit. Well, it's actually closed, but it's not shown here. We actually have a parasitic capacitor, which is air, that will actually close this circuit, and that capacitor is going to ground. So this is what makes the circuit oscillate every time, and that capacitor right there. But now this is a little bit more technical, but the main concepts are already explained. So yeah, that's it. And now I'm gonna show you why. Now I'm gonna show you how my circuit works. So let's go to my circuit, and I'm gonna show you the effect of the Tesla coil. Okay, so here we are with the circuit. Again, it's a very, very simple circuit. I use some recycled materials, as you can see, so nothing fancy here. Okay, so this is the secondary coil right here. Right now the switch is off. This one, the blue wire represents the primary coil. As you can see, few returns, as I showed in the schematic. So 9-volt battery right here, transistor right here, the switch is here. They just to manually turn it on and off. So I'm gonna turn this on, and then the energy radiated from the secondary coil should be enough to excite this fluorescent bulb. Right now, as you can see, it's off and it's not doing anything, so the bulb is off. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the switch on. Okay, now let's see. Okay, here we have, I'm not even touching the coil, and you can see the bulb is excited, right? Same here. So yeah, that is the effect of a Tesla coil with a very, very simple circuit. Again, just using a transistor and a DC source, which is the cool part. So hopefully the concepts were clear in this video. You can build this on your own. It's very, very simple. So that is it for this video. I'm gonna turn this off, because otherwise the transistor will get really, really warm. It's a really, really small transistor, so I don't really want to melt that transistor. I don't really want to burn that transistor. So that is it for this video. Hopefully everything was clear, and thank you very much for watching.